Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Welcome back to the free-to-play account. Today we're going to be talking about the new Fragment Summon champion Python. I just thought I'd bring you in whether or not this is going to be achievable on my free-to-play account. As you can see, I'm still probably about a week or so in now, just a little bit over. My Kale's at level 50. I've got a bunch of champions that are leveling up as food champions. Just trying to work my way up towards my 6-star. Still a little bit far off that, but we're still going. I thought today I'd talk about whether or not this Python champion, who's a Force Affinity legendary support champion, Reviver, whether that's going to be achievable for my free-to-play account. Now, what you should know is that these fusion or fragment summon events are very intensive in terms of the dungeons that you need to be running. So you've got your main dungeons here: Ice Golem, Spider, Dragon's Lair, and Fire Knight, all of which you need to be able to run consistently throughout the fragment summons to be able to then pull the fragments, so you then can come through into the summon portal and be able to accumulate enough fragments to summon the champion. It's not also just the amount of dungeons that you need to be running as well, but also there's usually a champion chase or some sort of summon rush that accompanies these events, which means that you need to have a stack of ancient, void, and sacred shards at your disposal, and then which you can pull these champions to be able to get the points in the events and the tournaments that you've got going on. So you really do need to have a kind of a stack of resources behind you, including both the energy and the shards as well. So we'll be talking a little bit about how much you need of each of those to be able to go ahead and participate in these. Alright, so I thought I'd just start out by talking about the champion. So Python, who is he? He's a new champion. So as I've discussed, he's a Force Affinity, Lizardman, legendary support reviver. He's got in total 2 other skills, including his A1, so an A1, A2, A3. He's also then got a passive and a really strong aura there too. So in the background, I'm just running some XP farms. But let's talk about his ability. So on his A1, he's got an attacks 2 enemies, heals the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of this champion's max HP after each hit. So that means he's getting a 2 times heal, and it's based off his HP, not necessarily the champion that he's healing. So that means you can get some really big heals out of him if you build him up with a lot of HP. Alright, then he's A2, Shed Skin. So removes all debuffs from all allies, then heals them by 10% of their max HP, heals each ally by an extra 5% of their max HP for each debuff removed from them. So if you remove a bunch of debuffs, say for example you're in Hydra and you've got a bunch of poisons and fears and all the rest, you're able to get a huge heal that could potentially be up to somewhat of 30-40% heal even. And also then after that he places a block debuffs on all allies for 2 turns, and that books down to a 3-turn cooldown. And then his A3 is Immortal Serpent, so revives all dead allies with 50% HP, 50% turn meter, and then places a 25% strengthen debuff on all allies for 2 turns. That has a 7-turn cooldown but books down to a 4-turn cooldown. His passive as well, so allies receive 5% less damage from skills for each buff on them, and that stacks up to 25%. So if you've got 5 buffs on them, that's an automatic 25% damage reduction. So let's talk about why he's so strong. His passive, as I said, allies receive 5% less damage from skills for each buff on them, and that stacks up to 25% for each buff on them. So he already brings 2 really strong buffs with him. He's got the block debuffs, and then he's also got the strengthen as well. Quick side note about strengthen, by the way. The 25% version of strengthen actually gives you 25% less damage. So already you can see that if you've got people who place buffs on you, for example, like in my team at the moment, I've got my Mordecai who places my increased attack. If you're later into the game, you might have someone like Duchess who gives you the Veil, the increased attack as well. So there you've already got enough debuffs really to get the 25%, including the strengthen, which is already 25% again. So you're taking altogether 50% less damage. And if you're pairing those 2 together, Python and the Duchess, you're taking you could almost get up to 75% roughly, damage mitigation, which is insane. That's why he is so strong, in my view, is that he's got this passive here, which allows him, and there's not many champions out there that have this, that allows him to take less damage. He also brings that strengthen buff, and then he also has a full cleanse with a lot of healing attached in his kit as well. So for me, I reckon this champion is going to be one that people will want to pick up for sure. Now on to the actual fragment summon itself. Now let's go through what typically, of course we haven't had the calendar yet for what will be, how we'll be collecting these fragments, but typically the few events that usually come in are champion training. There might be the dungeon events such as Ice Golem, Fire Knight, Dragon, also as well Classic Arena. You've also then got other events such as the Summon Rush, the Champion Chase events where you get as many champions as you can, things like Artifact Enhancement, also Champion Training events. So things like those tournaments there where you're either A, going through dungeons, collecting you're trying to get as much clears as you can and in as high level dungeons as you can. Then also as well, you'll be looking to maybe like stay in arena, for example, champion training events, which just are you leveling up your champions, and I can maybe talk a little bit more about that in another video, about how I would approach that. Dungeon Divers is really just you farming the dungeons. Also as well, Artifact Enhancement, that's really just about how best you can spend your silver. So really, what would we need for these sorts of things? Well, you're looking roughly, if you can do each of the dungeon ones, they take, give or take, roughly about 150 odd runs of level 20 dungeons. So that means for me as a newer player who's coming in, I obviously can't run level 20 dungeons yet. I'm nowhere near it. I'm probably sitting around like 8 to 10 roughly, depending on the dungeon. I'd struggle probably a little bit more in Spider, for example, than compared to Dragon. But there's other people out there that would find that a little bit easier. So depends how far along you are with your account. Depends how much you'd probably struggle with an event like Dungeon Divers and the relevant, Ice Golem, Dragon tournaments, Spider tournaments, etc. The ones that probably people would find a little bit easier, especially if you're a bit more of a spender account, is the Summon Rush. So that's where you're using your shards to be able to get the fragments. So typically you'd be looking to have a nice bank of Sacred Shards, maybe some Ancients and some Voids. You're looking roughly anywhere between, say, for example, maybe like 4 Sacred Shards and 20 Ancient Shards, roughly between that to get the Summon Rush. Then again, it depends on your luck as well in terms of Champion Chases, if that lines up there as well. So at the moment for me, obviously I did a bit of a shard pull the other day on my account, so I'm probably not in the best situation at the moment for that event specifically. What else have we got as well? So we've also got, as I said, the Dungeon Divers, they usually line up. Champion Training events, this is probably one of the ones that I could actually do quite well because as you see, I'm farming up my champions at the moment, and you can see that in the background that's occurring right now. So I'm getting closer and closer to getting my Kale to a 6-star. It does take a little bit on a free-to-play account, especially it's your first champion. It is going to take a little while because you're farming a lower level stages. So you will be probably struggling to get through these as quickly as possible. As you see, I've moved up to the Deadlands now. I'm just seeing if I can get any extra War Maidens along the way to save me those rare books. Also as well, it's a bit further progressed than the speed gear stage that I was on, and I'm not really after gear so much anymore because I've decked out a lot of my champions in some nice gear that I've gotten from those dungeons. So right now I'm more after XP, and this one that I'm on right now I've found has been the easiest way for my Kale to 100% clear it, as opposed to the 99% where I'd be wasting energy if I fail it. So as I said, the champion training events I found to be the easier ones because I've got a lot more of those champions sitting there, and I've got a lot more of them as food ready to go to be leveled up, which I've got that all ready to go in the tavern. So I'm almost close enough to be able to get my Kale to 6-star. So I think the champion training event's probably the one that I will be able to do. So So really out of all of that, there's a lot of events. Again, we don't know the calendar just yet. It hasn't come out at the time of me recording this video. So I'm not sure which events will actually be on. But I just know that usually those are the few that come along is the dungeon events, the champion training, artifact enhancement, summon rush, and also as well maybe a champion chase. Those are the kind of events that you're looking at in terms of the fragment summon. So for me, do I think that I'm going to be able to pull this champion? I'd love to. Look, hands down, this champion would change my account for sure. And of course, I could make a clickbait title about that and make that into a video. But for me, I think right now, I'm not probably in a position where a week into my account that I'm able to go ahead and get ready for it. And that's why I made that decision the other day to make a pull on all my shards that I had available. Otherwise, I would have saved those for the summon rush. So guys, thanks very much for all the support on the recent videos. Make sure if you've watched this far, make sure you drop a like and subscribe. And thanks very much for sticking around, and we'll catch you in the next video.